June 6, 1944. Over the darkened skies of Normandy, paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne prepare to jump. Each soldier carries an awkward, boxy weapon strapped to his leg, a gun so peculiar that it earned nicknames like the plumber's nightmare, the cake decorator, and most famously, the grease gun. Designed to be cheap and disposable, it cost just $18.50, a fraction of the Thompson submachine gun it was meant to replace. Initially, troops regarded it with suspicion, even contempt. Yet despite its rough appearance, this modest, stamped metal firearm would become one of the most enduring submachine guns in U.S. military history, serving from World War II through Korea, Vietnam, and even the Gulf War. Special forces still use modernized, suppressed versions today. This is the story of the weapon no one wanted, but no one could live without. By the early 1940s, the U.S. faced a serious dilemma. The Thompson was powerful and precise, loved by criminals and soldiers alike, but it was painfully expensive and labor-intensive. Each unit required months of skilled labor, with costs rising well above what the military could spare as a global war loomed. America needed something simple, quick, and reliable. Designers looked overseas for inspiration. Germany had the MP40, straightforward and effective. Britain had the Sten, crude but cheap and functional. In 1942, U.S. authorities issued the directive, create a submachine gun from stamped steel, firing .45 ACP, easy to produce, and affordable enough to be discarded when broken. George Hyde of GM's Inland Division and Frederick Sampson from GM's Guide Lamp Division took on the challenge. They stripped the gun down to essentials. The receiver consisted of just two welded steel halves. The barrel, bolt face, and trigger were the only machine pieces. Everything else was stamped or pressed, resulting in a weapon with only 23 parts and a price tag of $18.50. The Army embraced the disposable concept. If it failed in combat, toss it and grab another. Production began in 1943, and in a remarkable 7 months, the gun went from concept to battlefield deployment, a speed unmatched in U.S. firearms history. By the end of World War II, over 600,000 units had been produced. Its combat debut came during D-Day, when paratroopers carried it into the pre-dawn darkness of Normandy. Unlike its predecessor, the Thompson, the grease gun could be jumped with, landed with, and fought with immediately. Compact at 22.8 inches with the stock collapsed, it was perfectly suited to cramped transport planes and gliders. Reaction from soldiers was initially harsh. Many saw it as crude and inferior, a cheap imitation of the MP40. Early models had flaws. The thin, right-side cocking handle could snap if dropped, rendering the weapon useless, and the 30-round single-column magazine was prone to jamming. Field soldiers improvised repairs, modifying cocking handles and reinforcing magazine catches. Despite these early frustrations, soldiers gradually discovered the gun's value. In the field, when it worked, it performed reliably and effectively. By 1945, reports from combat units praised the grease gun for its dependability in patrols and frontline operations. What ultimately changed opinions about the M3 was how quickly it could be brought into action and how effective it proved at close range. Weighing only 8 pounds when loaded, it was dramatically lighter than the 13-plus-pound Thompson, allowing soldiers to carry far more ammunition and stay in the fight longer. Its slow rate of fire, roughly 300 to 400 rounds per minute, gave it a steadiness the Thompson lacked and stretched out each magazine during prolonged engagements. And once the early production flaws were corrected, the gun developed a reputation that surprised even its fiercest critics. One infantryman later recalled his change of heart in a field interview. "I couldn't stand that thing when they issued it. It looked crude next to my Thompson, like it had been cobbled together from spare parts. But when things got rough, that gun never failed me. I dragged it through mud, rain, and everything else, and it just kept firing." Stories like his were far from rare. The M3 handled the heat and dust of North Africa, the ice-covered forests during the Battle of the Bulge, and endless mud throughout Europe and the Pacific. Its enclosed operating system and generous tolerances meant it kept running in conditions that stopped other submachine guns cold. In military tests involving mud, sand, and rough handling, the M3 consistently outperformed every other American design of its era. Tank crews quickly embraced it as well. Late-war Sherman tanks were often fitted with several M3s for the crew's personal defense. A well-known photograph from November 5, 1944, shows Corporal Carlton Chapman of the 761st Tank Battalion, the famed Black Panthers, glancing out of his Sherman near Nancy, France, his M3 clearly visible. As Armorer Russell Spooner later explained, an M3 raised above a tank hatch could blanket a wide area in seconds, discouraging enemy troops from approaching a disabled vehicle or blocking an evacuation. The grease gun even found its way into liberation efforts. On April 6, 1945, when Combat Command B of the 14th Armored Division reached the Offlog B prisoner of war camp near Hammelburg, they discovered the gates still locked. 2 soldiers from the 47th Medium Tank Battalion solved the problem by firing their M3s at the locks, freeing nearly 500 American officers captured during the Battle of the Bulge. But the M3's story had a hidden chapter, one that remained classified for decades. The Office of Strategic Services, forerunner to the CIA, needed a submachine gun that could be suppressed effectively for secret operations deep behind enemy lines. The M3's compact shape and its naturally subsonic .45 ACP ammunition made it ideal. In late 1942, the OSS ordered 1,000 suppressed versions from high standard. Guide lamp modified the barrels with gas bleed ports, and scientists at Bell Laboratories designed an unusually long suppressor packed with wire mesh instead of baffles. The barrel extended only partway into the suppressor, and the tightly wrapped mesh slowed the escaping gases so effectively that the sound of the gun's cycling was louder than the shot itself. These weapons were issued to OSS agents and resistance fighters throughout occupied Europe, including one surviving example tied to a planned mission that ended only because the war concluded first. Agents also used 9mm conversion kits so they could fire captured German ammunition when resupply was impossible. Across the Pacific, the M3 served with Marine tank crews on Iwo Jima and Okinawa, while Navy ships stored them for shore parties. Chinese nationalist forces and OSS-supported guerrillas in Burma relied on them in brutal jungle fighting. And despite having been conceived as a disposable wartime expedient, the weapon refused to disappear. A major improvement arrived in late 1944 with the M3A1. The fragile cocking handle was eliminated entirely. Instead, a simple oval slot allowed the shooter to pull back the bolt with a finger. The stock was redesigned to serve as both a magazine loader and a barrel wrench, and a small oiler was tucked into the pistol grip. For covert missions, the entire weapon could be broken down into a compact 13-inch package. When the Korean War began, Ithaca produced more than 33,000 additional M3A1s, and the grease gun became the primary submachine gun of U.S. and South Korean forces, a practical choice, since many communist troops carried captured Thompsons from World War II. In Vietnam, the M3A1 found new life again. It appeared in the hands of U.S. personnel, South Vietnamese units, helicopter crews, and special operations teams. Suppressed versions became tools of Marine Force Recon, Navy SEALs, and Army long-range patrol teams operating deep behind enemy lines. Even Montagnard fighters armed by American advisors used grease guns to defend remote villages against Viet Cong attacks. The story of the M3 did not end with World War II, nor even with Korea or Vietnam. When Delta Force was established in 1977, the suppressed M3A1, nicknamed the M301 in special operations circles, was their first-choice submachine gun. Some reports suggest that operators carried them during the ill-fated Iran hostage rescue attempt, Operation Eagle Claw, in 1980, though documentation remains scarce. Regardless, the M3 continued to serve reliably in U.S. armored units throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s. It equipped M60 tanks, personnel carriers, and recovery vehicles, and veterans of Desert Storm recalled crews still relying on these small, sturdy guns nearly 50 years after they were first designed. One former tank commander even noted that his unit maintained 2 M3A1s in the armory as recently as 2001. Official retirement came only in 1992, by which time some M3s were approaching 50 years of service, and still operational. The M3 stands as a striking paradox in the history of military firearms. Cheap, unrefined, and designed in just 7 months by engineers who normally made car headlights, it defied all expectations. Its appearance was modest, its origins humble, yet it outlasted the cherished Thompson, the M1 Garand, and even the M14 rifle. Over half a century, it fought in more conflicts and endured harsher conditions than almost any other American submachine gun. The lesson was simple but enduring: in war, elegance and cost mean nothing. What counts is reliability when it matters most. And for 50 years, from the hedgerows of Normandy to the deserts of the Persian Gulf, from frozen forests to the sweltering interiors of tanks, the plain, boxy grease gun delivered every time. George Hyde and Frederick Sampson may have designed America's cheapest submachine gun, but in doing so, they created a weapon whose value could never be measured in dollars. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. See you in the next video.